Once the decking goes down, your frame is hidden permanently. I'm Dr. Decks, 35 years, 500 plus builds. Here's what every deck frame should have. If you have somebody building your deck for you and you walk out and you take a look at the frame before the decking's laid and you don't see these are called joist hangers. And they are very vital to the success of the longevity of your deck. So if these are not installed on your deck, insist that they be installed on your deck. Depending on the size of your joists will determine the size of your joist hanger. You can't use a 2x6 hanger on a 2x10 joist. You can, however, use a 2x8 hanger on a 2x10 joist. That is acceptable to code. For these, this is a 2x10 joist. So I'm gonna use a 2x10 hanger, even though I could have used a 2x8, but I like to have a little bit more coverage. So that one is visible, but the next one, you kind of need to know what to look for. It's joist spacing. When you're laying deck boards, they are only allowed to space a certain amount of inches, and it's called on center or OC. So what that means is, from the center of this joist to the center of this joist, the maximum allowable span for decking is usually 16 inches. We usually bring that span into about 14 inches or equal distances of around 14 or so inches. This particular section of the deck is 14¼ inches on center because that's what laid out for our spacing to keep all of our joists equal. The reason I like to go 14 and not 12, may you ask? Well, 12 inches on center, the joists are getting really packed, really tight. Now, sometimes you gotta use 12 inches on center because of spans. But on this deck, we didn't have to do that in this section of the deck, but we did wanna go 14 on center. It's engineered that way, so we just make sure we're in that neighborhood because we can go up to 16, but 14 inches on center is ample, but it still allows us to get through the joist, work through it, be able to get our nail guns and our screw guns in here a little bit easier than if we're 12 inches on center. If you measure this, don't measure in between the joists. And if you have 16 in between the joists, you're in trouble because that's too far apart. It has to be from the center of the joist to the center of the joist, okay? So if I hook the joist like this, and I measured from the right side of the joist to the right side of the joist, I'm about 14 3/16. So 14¼ all right? So that's right on spot. So I've seen 18, 19, 20, even 24 inches on center, and the deck boards are doing this in between the joists. You don't want that. All right, those two tips are on the frame. Let's go down to the ground and check out what's going on down there. Make sure that your footings are properly sized for the deck. Sometimes this might require a structural engineer. I don't know how to do all the math to make sure that the load has capable support for your deck. All I know is that we're using helical piles, and these piles had to be driven deeper because of the soil conditions. So this particular footing is 11 foot deep in the ground, and we could have used different methods of footings, but for our particular circumstance, this was the best way to go. Some people will use like a precast footing block from Home Depot or from a home center. Usually we don't do that. If we use precast footing, we use an 18-inch round footing that isn't available in a lot of other areas, but we can get them here. And we don't use them very often. Usually we're digging and pouring concrete, or we're using helical piles that are structured to fit the loading requirement of the deck. Depending on where you live, you might have frost heave. So if you don't go deep enough, you might get the footing to move in the wintertime. Or if it's not sized properly, the footing can sink and it might shift or move under load or duress. And what's sitting on top of those footings matters just as much. You wanna make sure that your posts and your beams, and for that matter, even your joists, are all adequately sized for your deck. If you're gonna span a further distance without posts, you gotta make sure that the beam will handle the load of that. This is a structural engineered beam, so it'll span further than a standard wood beam will. This is called an LVL, and it's made for exterior use. So something like that will span further than a standard 4x10 or 6x10 will. I personally use a structural engineer, but if you don't have that resource, just a good rule of thumb, if you want to go out and check and make sure that those beams aren't overspanned, then go to the internet, look for a beam span chart or a post sizing chart to know, should I be using a 4x6, a 4x4, or a 6x6 for my posts? And should I be using a 6x8, a 6x10, a 4x12? What size beam should I use? There's a few things that determine that. and the span chart will help you figure that out. Now here's one that most people don't even think to check. See these boards in the middle that are going in between here? This is called mid-span pressure blocking. What that does, it helps with deflection of the deck to keep the joist from bouncing up and down. It becomes more of a continuous unit versus individual joists. Also, it keeps our joists nice and straight, because right now they're curving this way and they're curving this way. It brings everything together in a nice pattern. And when we're up there walking on it, it solidifies everything so it doesn't bounce back and forth or get jaggedy or rickety while we're walking around on it. And it also helps keep the joist from rolling a little bit in a case of an earthquake. As you'll notice, over the beam, there's also over beam blocking. That also helps with keeping things nice and tight, and it also helps with our cantilever because we have 2 feet of framing going past the beam, and it helps solidify that as well. And then one thing that we haven't installed yet, now you'll see that there's some temporary braces up here. Those are coming down, but when we take those down before the decking's laid, this deck becomes wobbly. So we're gonna add some V bracing underneath this deck, and it's going to go from the center of the deck and it's gonna V out like this. And that will eliminate racking of this deck. And when I say eliminate, it's the best way, in my opinion, to straighten or tighten up a deck. If you have a deck that wobbles, consider adding some V bracing into the deck. A lot of people I've talked to already know that their deck is wobbly, but if you're not sure, go out to the outside edge of your deck, stand on it with a staggered stance about 2 to 3 feet apart with your feet, and go like this. If the deck continues to want to do that, then you probably need some V bracing. That one you can test yourself. This next one requires only 5 seconds to check, and it's required by code. This is a deck tension tie kit. It comes with 4 brackets and all the hardware to attach your deck to the house so that it doesn't come away from the house. They're also called a lateral tension tie. These are now required by code on every deck we build, and they have to be installed in a certain way in a certain circumstance, and the directions are in the box or on the internet for the manufacturer's webpage, and they have to be installed at a minimum of 4 per deck for this type of tie, and 2 per deck if you're gonna go the invasive route, which is what we're gonna do. Last one, and this isn't the one that just will damage your deck, it will also damage your house. If you don't have this, it can cost you thousands. So make sure that your deck is properly flashed. In this particular instance, we're gonna have a waterproof ladder going up the side of the house, and then we're gonna put a trim board up, but we have to make sure it flashes so the water can't go behind this board and get the side of the house wet. I've had to rebuild the entire wall of homes before because there was no proper flashing put in, and the water came in and it rotted everything out. So we always put waterproof membrane tape behind all of our ledgers that we attach to the house. And we also use different types of bladder materials. If we weren't doing this, we would take a piece of L flashing and run it up the wall and over this, and sometimes Z metal, which will come around the corner and hang back down. You just gotta make sure that the water can't get back into this point right here. If you don't see this, that's a big red flag. Make sure you're getting flashing installed on your deck. That's the standard, and any builder worth hiring already knows every one of these.